start with the name of Allah who knows our heart secrets. I am Ali Hasnain from the Department of Computer Science, Sydney University Campus, Larkano. Today is my presentation video on the topic visual programming. So these are my topic outlines: dynamic link library, threads and synchronization, client server, reference and assemblies. So my first topic is a dynamic link library, is a DDL. So the dynamic link library DDL is an executable file that acts as a shared library for the functions. Dynamic linking provides a way for a process to the call a function that is not part of the executable code. The executable code for the function is also located in the DDL, which contains one or more function from the compile linked and stored separately from the process that use them. DDL also facilitates the sharing of data and resources. Multiple applications can simultaneously access the content of the single copy of DDL in a memory. Example of important DDL files. So this is a COMDLG32DDL. It's a control the dialog box, and CDI32DDL contains the numerous functions of drawing graphics, display text and managing the fonts. Third one is a kernel32.ddl, contains hundreds of functions for the management of memory and the various processes. Fourth one is the user32DDL, contains the numerous user interface functions involved in a creation of the program windows, their interaction with each other. Kinds of functions. All the DDL can be defined two kinds of the function. The exported function are the intended to be called by models as well from within the DDL where they are defined. Internal functions are typically intended to be called only for within DDL where they are defined. So the type of DDL. When you load a DDL in an application, two methods of linking lets you call the exported DDL function DDL, and therefrom the two types of is a branch of the DDL. First one is the load time dynamic linking. Second one is the runtime dynamic linking. So the load time dynamic linking is in a load time dynamic linking in application makes explicit calls to the exported DDL functions like the locals. To use a load dynamic linking provides a header H file from the imported library .lib file. When you compile and link the application, when you do this linker, when the provide the system with the information that is required to load the DDL and resolve the exported DDL function location at load time. So the runtime dynamic linking. In runtime dynamic linking, an application calls their load library function or the load library EX functions load the DDL at the runtime. After the DDL is successfully loaded, you use the get proc address function to obtain the address of the exported DDL function that you want to call. When you use the runtime dynamic linking, you do not need an import library file. Application criteria. Startup performance. If you initially startup performance of the application is important, you should use a runtime dynamic linking. Easy of use. In the load time dynamic linking is exported DDL function or like a local function is this mistakes it easily for you to create the functions. Application logic. In the runtime dynamic linking, a application can be branched to the load different models as required. That is important when you develop linking multiple language versions. So the difference between application and the DDL. From the system's point of the view, there are two fundamental differences between the application and the DDL. An application an application can be multiple intents of the itself running in the system simultaneously, where DDL can have only intents. An application can be on things such as the stack, global memory files, handles, and the message is the sequentially performs. So the DDL advantages: save the memory and reduce the sweeping. Many processes use in a single DDL simultaneously, sharing the single copy of the DDL in the memory. Save the disk space. Many applications can share the single copy of the DDL on the disk. In the contrast, each application built with the static library provide aftermarket support. For example, a display driver DDL can be modified to support a display that's what available when application was shipped. So the DDL advantages: the application is not itself contains, it depends on the existence of the separated DDL modules. And the DDL dependencies. First one, a dependent DDL is upgraded to the new version. A dependent DDL is fixed. A dependent DDL is overwritten is an earlier version. A dependent DDL is removed from the computer. And my second topic of this, the thread and the synchronizations. So what is thread? The content of my second topic is what is thread. Thread in C# are in visual programming. Types of threads. Threads priority in C#, controlling threads in the C#. So what is thread? In a computer science, a thread is a smallest unit of the processing that be scheduled by an operating system. It generally results from of a computer program. The implementation of thread is a process differ from operating system can and another, but in the most case in the thread is a content inside the process. Thread in the C#. A thread in the independent stream of instruction in a program. All your C# programs up to this point have entry point in the main method. Execution start with the first statement in the main method and the continuous unit until that the method runs. The program structure is a very well from the function. In there is a difficult identified sequence of the task in the threads. It may be control the threads. So the types of threads. There are two basic types of thread: foreground thread and the background thread. The process of application keeps running as long as at least the foreground thread is running. Even if a main method ends, the process of the application remain the active until all the foreground threads finish their work. A thread is created with the threads class by the default is a foreground of the threads. So the thread priority in the C#. The operating system schedule threads based on the priority in the threads with the highest priority scheduled into the run into the CPU. With the thread class, you can influence the property of the thread by the setting the priority of the property. The property of the require is a value is defined in the thread property enumeration. The level defines the highest above normal, normal below normal, and the lowest one. Controlling the threads. The threads involved by the start method of the threads is still in the running state in the unstarted the state. The thread changes the running state soon as the operating system there the scheduler select thread to run. You can read the content state for the thread reading by the property of the thread state with the thread sleeps thread method, and the thread goes into the wait sleep join states and wait until you woken up to the after the time and spam defined with the sleep methods. So the thread synchronization, a race condition for the occurs in the two mode threads as the shared in the data absence of the threads absence of the synchronization. It's the best avoid synchronization issues by not sharing data between thread of the course is not always possible. If data sharing is necessary, you must use synchronization technology for that only thread at a time access the changes thread in the states. So my third topic is a client and the server. So there are the contents. It's the introduction of this client and the server components, application functions, type of server, advantages, disadvantages, and the reference. So the introduction. What is introduction of client and server? And a network architecture in which each computer or the process on the network either a client or a server. So the components client, server, communication, and the communication network. So the client application that run computers rely on a server for file device processing power. Example email client, an application that enables you to send and receive emails. So what is a server? In a computer or a process that manages the network resources like disk driver, file server, printer server, network traffic, network servers. Example database server, a, a computer that process data requires. So the communication networks like a computer connected to each other with the server and the switches, that's called the communication networks. Network connects client and the servers. So the client server computing process takes place on the server and on the client. Server store and protect data, process request from the client. Client make request, format data on the desktop. So the application function, software application functions are separated in the three distinct parts like the server data management, client server, client process management. So the application component, data management, application logic, presentation, and the logic tiers. Database application most common use for the users. So the middleware is also in the client and the server. Software that contains two otherwise separated application. Example middleware product linking database system to a web server. So the types of the server: application server, audio video server, chat server, fax server, FTP server, groupware server, IRC server, list servers, mail servers, news servers, proxy servers, telnet servers, webnet servers, Z3950 servers. So the advantages: improve the data sharing, integration of the data service, shared resource amongst different platforms, interoperation of the data processing capabilities despite the location, easy maintenance and the security. And here the disadvantage of the client so of the server, overload server, impact of the centralized architecture. So my fourth and final topic, fourth topic is a reference and the assemblies. There is a mistake in the numbers, like this is a 3 and this is also 3 numbers. So this is my last and 4 topic. So here is a what's the assembly. A function unit of any .NET application contains the code that executed by the CLR. CLR is a command line language runtime. Contains name, version, types, classes and others created unit it and detail about the assemblies in the reference may be either an executable file like exe and the dynamic link library like DDL. And the structure of assembly manifest, type metadata, MSIL code, resource optional. And the structure of the assembly manifest contains assembly name, version number of the assembly, cultural language assembly supports strong name required only for the global assemblies, list file and the assembly can be made up of multiple files. The type reference information contains type in the file of the assembly. Information about the reference assemblies is the contents list of and other assemblies in with the list of reference by the assembly. For each the assembly reference will have assembly name, version, culture in the public key or the in this assembly is a globally meant in the contents. For the structure of the assembly, the type metadata, this is a section of an assembly contains information about all the class structure etc created in the assembly. MSIL code of the assembly is placed in the tried part of the assembly. This is the MSIL converted into native code by the CLR at the runtime. Resource, this section contains message and the picture used by the assembly. So the private assembly is an assembly that is developed with an application in the variable for the exclusive use of the application. Other applications do not share the private assembly or not of the method can be the used to create isolated application. It is stored in the directory where the application resided. So the global assembly, a global assembly is a public assembly is shared by the multiple application. Unlike private assembly, global assemblies and it is not a stored location where the application resides. Globally assembly in the instead is placed in the GAC global assembly cache and it can be the reference where anywhere in within the systems. So only one copy is stored but many application can be used the single copy in this assembly placed. Assembly placement for the .NET framework assembly that make the application or the located in the application directory in the subdirectory of the application directory or in the global assembly cache. If the assembly needs used by the multiple application, then one should make it the global, else keep it the private. So thank you very much. This is my final presentation of the visual programming. Thank you very much.